If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and also don't forget to click on the notification bell so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network.
The Wolfpack Alliance is a Canadian organized crime group, considered to be an allied and multi-ethnic group of mostly millennial-aged gangsters who operated across the country. Law enforcement has described the Wolfpack as not a single group, but rather a consortium that united several organized crime groups together. The Wolfpack Alliance was founded in the lower mainland of British Columbia by the Hells Angels member Larry Nero as a side project. Hells Angels are allowed to create side projects as long as the other members of the relevant chapter are aware of the project and allowed to participate if they so desire. The other leaders of the Wolfpack Alliance were Jonathan Bacon of the Red Scorpions and Randy Naker and James Ryach of the Independent Soldiers. The first public evidence of the existence of the group was that Bacon was often seen with Amaro on the latter's speedboat, steroids and silicone. The Wolfpack worked as distributors of cocaine from the Sinaloa Cartel of Mexico, whose leader was Joaquin Guzman, better known by his moniker El Chapo. The Wolfpack soon took in other members, most notably the Al Khalil family, Johnny Raposo of Toronto, Martino Lil Guy Caputo of Niagara-on-the-Lake, Shane Maloney of Montreal's West End Gang, and Nick Nero, a drug smuggler from Niagara Falls. The oldest of the Al Khalil brothers, Nabil Al Khalil, who fled Canada in 2010, ended settling in Ciudad López Mateos, while continuing to be active in organized crime. Nabil Al Khalil served as the liaison with the Sinaloa Cartel. Robbie Al Khalil, the youngest of the Al Khalil brothers, lived in Montreal, where he owned an expensive penthouse condominium at 555 René Levesque Boulevard West, with a view of the St. Lawrence River that made his condo one of the most expensive in Old Montreal. Caputo, who officially worked as a property developer in the Golden Horseshoe area, served as the Rizzuto family's agent for the Greater Toronto area. The Wolfpack leaders used encrypted texts on the Pretty Good privacy system to communicate and wrote frankly about plans to commit murders. Caputo had no criminal record and was one of Toronto's most successful businessmen, who owned and operated the well-regarded Savory restaurant from 1996 to 2004. Sergeant Brenda Winpenny of the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit told the journalist Ratton Mall in 2017, "We've publicly confirmed in the past that the Wolfpack has a presence not only across Canada but internationally. They have had a presence in other provinces, like Ontario, for at least a couple years, and several gang members who have ties to the Wolfpack, like Hells Angel Larry Amaro, have been back east for several years. Albeit Larry's in jail, but he has spent a lot of time between here and Ontario and Quebec." Peter Edwards, the crime correspondent of the Toronto Star, described the Wolfpack leaders as, "They grew up as kids craving attention, who wanted to be rock stars, but didn't really have any skills. They displayed an overwhelming sense of entitlement. Through their drug associations, they became more interesting to girls who are out of their league." Edwards stated the group expanded via the internet, saying, "They're bonded by the internet, not by geography. Some are in Vancouver, some are in Montreal, some are in Toronto, and it doesn't really matter, they can move around. You could say, that group is from Woodbridge, those groups from Simcoe Street and Oshawa. With the Wolfpack, there isn't a place, there's just a shared feeling or need for the internet." Luis Najera, the former crime correspondent of La Reforma newspaper of Ciudad Juarez, stated about the Wolfpack, "Technology, the internet, changes a lot of dynamics of power, relationships, contacts and businesses, both legal and illegal. The internet became a platform where they don't necessarily need to be physically together always. Remember in the old days or in the movies where the mafiosos got together in a dark place or ugly warehouse and they sit and discuss business? Those times are pretty much over now. On October 16, 2010, Gurmit Singh Dak, the co-boss of the Dak Dure gang, was murdered. Dak was shot in the face in his automobile at the parking lot of the Metrotown Mall in Burnaby. Kim Bolan, the crime correspondent of the Vancouver Sun newspaper, wrote in 2018, Dak's execution was the flashpoint for a near-decade-long war that has raged across the province and left many dead and wounded in its wake. Suvir, Suk Dak, the younger brother of Gurmit, believed that the Wolfpack alliance were the ones responsible for his brother's murder and vowed to avenge him. Dak had hired a team of 4 hitmen to hunt down the Wolfpack and stayed in touch with them via encrypted text messages on his cell phone. The hit team placed GPS tracking devices on bottoms of automobiles belonging to the Wolfpack as a way to track them down. On August 14, 2011, Jonathan Bacon was murdered via gunfire outside the Delta Grand Hotel in Kelowna. At about 2:45 p.m. on August 14, 2011, a white Porsche Cayenne carrying 6 people was leaving the parking lot of the Delta Grand Hotel when a group of 4 masked gunmen carrying AK-47 assault rifles opened fire. The gunmen fired at least 30 shots into the Cayenne, killing Bacon, wounding Amero, and leaving a 21-year waitress, Leah Haddon-Watts, a quadriplegic as she took a bullet straight through her neck, severing her spinal cord. After the Kelowna incident, Amero relocated to Montreal, where he lived as a guest in Al-Khalil's condo. Edwards and Najera wrote that Amero and Al-Khalil tightened up their own connections with Mexican cocaine suppliers during their time in Montreal. A key member of the Wolfpack proved to be Shane Kenneth Wheels Maloney of the West End gang. Al-Khalil, in texts to Nero, described Maloney as providing the chemists who tested the purity of cocaine that was being brought into Montreal. The West End gang controls the port of Montreal, which enabled drug smuggling on a massive scale. Maloney was known as Wheels, due to be confined to a wheelchair as he is a paraplegic owing to an automobile incident, but he was considered to be one of the most important Wolfpack leaders. In 2012, Maloney was charged with smuggling on behalf of both the West End gang and the Wolfpack, and was convicted in 2017. The Wolfpack Alliance were reported to have smuggled in about 400 kilograms of cocaine per month into Montreal. The United Nations gang aligned itself with the Dak Dure group against the Wolfpack. On January 16, 2012, a United Nations gang member, Sal Sabaz of Surrey, was murdered in Mexico. His corpse was not looted, and he had some $20,000 US dollars in his wallet. On January 17, 2012, Sandip Dippy Dure, the co-boss of the Dak Dure group, was shot dead while leaving a Vancouver hotel in a revenge attack for the Delta Grand Hotel incident. On the 18th of January 2012, a United Nations gang leader, Thomas Gisby, was almost killed in a bombing of his mobile home in Whistler. Gisby fled to Mexico after the murder attempt. On April 28, 2012, Gisby was murdered at a Starbucks in Nueva Vallarta at about 9 a.m. The killers of Gisby used a .44 Magnum handgun, a rare weapon in Mexico, where the standard weapons used in murders are AK-47 assault rifles, 9mm handguns, or 38 pistols. A Wolfpack member who called himself Sosa texted Al-Khalil at 10:16 a.m. the same day from Mexico to claim credit for Gisby's murder, and exaggerated the details, such as claiming to have used a .50 caliber gun to do the deed. Nika was shot dead outside of a Starbucks cafe in Port Moody on June 25, 2012. On November 19, 2012, Suvir Suk Dak and his bodyguard Thomas Mantle were murdered. Between 2010 to 2013, there were 20 murders in the Lower Mainland related to the gang war started by the murder of Gurmit Singh Dak. A member of the Dak Dure group, Manjot Singh Dhillon, took to posting images of dead wolves on his Facebook profile starting in early January 2013 as a public way of indicating he was planning to strike at the Wolfpack. At about 9:30 p.m. on January 13, 2013, Dylan was found almost dead by the side of Colebrook Road in Surrey, with several bullet wounds, and died later that night of his wounds at the hospital. On January 14, 2013, Manjinder Mani Singh Hairan, one of the gunmen who had killed Jonathan Bacon in 2011, was shot dead in Surrey. On January 28, 2013, Jaskaran Singh Sandhu of the Dak Duri group was murdered in Surrey, and the next month, Amritpal Paul Saran of the Dak Duri group was likewise murdered in Surrey. The Montreal wing of the Wolfpack operated a smuggling ring, bringing cocaine through secret compartments in trucks into and from the United States. Montreal is regarded as the most important city in the Canadian underworld, as it is a major port city with ocean access, well connected via highways to other cities, and is only 332 miles from New York City, the biggest and richest drug market in North America. Edwards and Nehera wrote that Montreal was the epicenter of Canadian organized crime, as whatever faction that dominates Montreal dominates the national organized crime scene. As organized crime scene in Vancouver was fractured, Toronto was dominated by 7 Ndrangheta families who had a limited range outside of the Toronto area, and the mafia families of Hamilton were largely a local phenomenon. Edwards and Nehera wrote that the leaders of the Montreal Mafia dealt directly with the 5 families of New York, while the Canadian Hells Angels, whose headquarters are in Montreal, were Canada's most powerful criminal syndicate with chapters or puppet gangs in every province. Both Amero and Al-Khalil lived in Montreal, not so much because of their interest in seizing control of the drug market in Montreal, but rather because they wanted to use Montreal as a stepping stone to enter the New York drug market. The 2 men in charge who answered to Amero and Al-Khalil were Frédéric Lavoie and Timoleon Siharis. Charis and Lavoie bribed truck drivers who were employed by bonded trucking companies to smuggle cocaine. The Wolfpack in Montreal smuggled about 400 kilograms of cocaine per month. On August 8, 2012, Al-Khalil's condo was raided by the Sûreté du Québec and the Service de Police de la Ville de Montréal, with warrants for the arrest of both Al-Khalil and Amero, who had both already fled. Found inside of Al-Khalil's condo was a group photograph of the Wolfpack leaders, taken in front of Parliament Hill in Ottawa. The fact that Amero, Al-Khalil, and Shane Wheels Maloney of the West End Gang were in the centre indicated that they were the leaders of the group, as it is the normal custom in the Canadian underworld for leaders of the gang to be placed in the centre of a group photograph. More trouble for the Wolfpack occurred on August 11, 2012, when a Montreal Wolfpack drug courier, Ricardo Ruffalo, was murdered when answering his door. On September 26, 2012, Lavoie called a meeting in a downtown Montreal bar with Mihaly Leventis and another man who remained unidentified, who was working as a police informer. The meeting discussed such matters such as plans to import cocaine from Mexico and Peru. The most troublesome member of the Wolfpack to the other members of the group proved to be Nicola Nero of Niagara Falls, who was described by a high school classmate as "dumb they come." After his release on parole, Nero became closely associated with Martino Caputo of Toronto, who worked for the Rizzuto family of Montreal. The police suspected that Nero did not intend to abide by his parole conditions, as he violated his bail conditions. The police started an investigation of Nero dubbed Project Inc. In February 2012, the police seized 110 kilograms of cocaine worth $30 million from a warehouse in St. Catharines, which the police knew belonged to Nero. He had become of the most important cocaine smugglers in Canada, bringing in an average of 400 kilograms of cocaine per week into the Niagara Peninsula via boats and trucks. In the spring of 2012, a love triangle led to a murder. Caputo and Raposo, who were supposed to be best friends, were both having an affair with the same women who worked as a waitress in a Toronto restaurant, whom Edwards and Nero noted was not to be confused with either the mother of Raposo's son or Caputo's moneyed girlfriend. Caputo used Nero as his instrument for disposing of his romantic rival Raposo. Caputo, in his texts to Nero, expressed much hatred of Raposo, as made numerous disparaging remarks about him from April 2012 onward, and promoted the thesis that Raposo was an informer. Raposo, Nero, Al-Khalil and Caputo were planning to bring in a shipment of cocaine from Mexico via Chicago that was worth $5 million, with the profits to be split equally 4 ways. The last 3 decided to kill Raposo to take his share of the profits for themselves. To assist with the planned murder, on May 18, 2012, Caputo texted to Nero pictures of Raposo, together with his address and that of the Sicilian Sidewalk Cafe, which was Raposo's favorite coffee shop, saying he should pass this information along to Al-Khalil's hitman. At the same time, Caputo had attended the baptism of Raposo's son by his common-law wife Monica and told him numerous times, "I love you, bro." Nero requested that Caputo send pictures of Raposo's son from the baptism to the hitman. On the 21st May 2012, Al-Khalil offered his favorite hitman, Dean Michael Wuchar, $100,000 in cash for killing Raposo. Wuchar, who never met Raposo and did not know nor cared why Al-Khalil wanted Raposo dead, promptly accepted the offer. Wuchar texted Al-Khalil back on the same afternoon, "Ice cream boy, Raposo is getting it." On May 23, 2012, Nero was arrested at the St. Catherine's halfway house without incident, as the supposed tough guy, Nero offered no resistance. The same day that Nero was arrested, his fiancée Tonya Delben Fletcher was also arrested in Niagara-on-the-Lake and charged with narcotic possession for the purpose of trafficking, conspiracy to import narcotics, conspiracy to traffic in narcotics, conspiracy to possess narcotics for the purpose of trafficking, and counseling to commit obstruction of justice. As Nero's parole conditions had forbidden him to own a cell phone, he left his cell phone at Fletcher's condo. At the time of her arrest, she owned 2 condos, one in Niagara-on-the-Lake and another condo in Yorkville, 2 luxury sports automobiles, was wearing a $750,000 engagement ring, and had $1 million in cash in the Yorkville condo. Nero could not remember his email address and passport to the Pretty Good Privacy Network, so he wrote his email address, cervezafryer@encryptroid.com, and his password, #0, on a yellow sticky note, which was found by the police right next to his cell phone on the kitchen countertop in Fletcher's Niagara-on-the-Lake condo, following his arrest on May 23, 2012. Nero also wrote down his password and email address, which was found on another sticky pad note placed next to his laptop computer. The columnist Christy Blatchford noted, "Among the things the police saw and photographed was a sticky note with Nero's email and password, which later let them bypass the data encryption program called PGP. The initials stand for Pretty Good Privacy. Alas, when the user thoughtfully provides his secret password on a sticky, it's easily defeated." The Sinaloa cartel had long had doubts about the competence of the Wolfpack, especially Nero, and decided after his arrest to move into Canada themselves. On May 24, 2012, Wuchar flew to Toronto and began to hunt Raposo, using the information provided by Caputo to learn about the Bloor West Village neighborhood that Raposo lived in, as Wuchar needed to know where to find Raposo and the best escape route after killing him. Raposo was aware that Al-Khalil and Amero had become inexplicably distant towards him and told his common-law wife Monica that was planning to visit Montreal soon to see the Wolfpack leaders to resolve whatever the issues there might be. On June 18, 2012, Wuchar shot Raposo at the Sicilian Sidewalk Cafe on Toronto's College Street. Wuchar walked into the Sicilian Sidewalk Cafe, dressed as a construction worker, while wearing a dust mask and a wig. As the ardent football fan, Raposo intensely followed the Ireland vs Italy Eurocup football match being aired live on the cafe's television. Wuchar walked up to him and shot him 4 times in the head and once in the neck from behind. On the same day, Al-Khalil texted Wuchar, "Time we put you in sniper school, I think. This seems too easy for Wu." Caputo visited Raposo's widow Monica on the evening of that day to express his sympathy while he claimed that he was full of sorrow over the murder of his best friend, Raposo. On June 21, 2012, Wuchar was arrested in Toronto. When told by a police constable that he was under arrest for first-degree murder, Wuchar asked, "Which one?" Al-Khalil was thrown into panic by Wuchar's arrest and texted Amero on the same day, "Zelda Wuchar first-degree murder." The cocaine shipment worth $5 million arrived in a Toronto junkyard, but was stolen by an unknown person before Caputo and Al-Khalil received it. The Sinaloa cartel were furious with the theft of the cocaine, which the Wolfpack had received on consignment, and threatened to send up killers from Mexico to torture and murder all of the Wolfpack for their incompetence in losing $5 million worth of cocaine. Caputo fled Canada to Germany, where he was arrested in Cologne on the 16th of February 2013, while attempting to go to Poland with a forged Italian passport. Al-Khalil, who fled to Greece, was arrested in Athens on February 23, 2013, while living on a forged French passport. Both Caputo and Al-Khalil were returned to Canada following extradition requests to face charges of first-degree murder in connection with Raposo's slaying. In November 1, 2012, the Sûreté du Québec and the Service de Police de la Ville de Montreal, as part of Project L'Equace, arrested 103 members of the Wolfpack in Montreal on the basis of the wire worn by the informer. Syharis fled to his native Greece. On the 20th of November 2012, the burned corpse of Syharis was found in the Greek countryside. Syharis had been tortured by his killers, and his face was burned off with acid before he was finally killed with a bullet through his head. The murder of Syharis remains unsolved. Lavoie escaped to Colombia on a forged Bahamian passport. In Colombia, Lavoie joined forces with a Canadian mixed martial arts fighter and gangster, Stephen Skinner, in a drug smuggling ring. On the morning of May 11, 2014, the dismembered body of Lavoie was discovered on a bridge along La Vereda Pan de Azucar, sugar-bread footpath, in the countryside outside of Sabaneta. The killers of Lavoie had chopped him into 4 pieces while he was still alive. The 4 pieces of what had once been Lavoie had been placed in plastic bags and left on the bridge as a warning. Lavoie's murder likewise remains unsolved. It is believed that both Syharis and Lavoie were killed to punish them for recruiting a police informer into the Wolfpack. The extreme sadism shown by the killers of Syharis and Lavoie is typical of the Sinaloa cartel's killers, and the police believe that both murders have very well had been the work of the Sinaloa cartel. The Wolfpack were used by Guzman and the Sinaloa cartel to establish a drug distribution network in Canada, which allowed them to ultimately bypass the Wolfpack, as the Sinaloa cartel took over the networks that the Wolfpack had established. By early 2014, the Sinaloa cartel had cut out the middlemen in the form of the Wolfpack and started to distribute cocaine themselves in Canada, rendering the Wolfpack irrelevant. The Sinaloa cartel came to prefer operating in Canada owing to its weak justice system with regard to financial crimes, which made Canada an ideal place for money laundering. In addition, it is extremely easy for members of the Sinaloa cartel to obtain Canadian passports, both legally and illegally. Edwards and Nahera wrote, "The Wolfpack helped to usher the cartels into Canada, and both profited and suffered for their greed and ambition. Through their actions, a dark corner was rounded, and there could be no turning back." In January 2014, Ryak was arrested in the Philippines on charges of smuggling drugs into the Philippines from Mexico. On September 9, 2014, Nero was convicted of drug trafficking, gangsterism, and living off the proceeds of crime. Mohammed Reza Amin Tarabi, the former Mr. Canada bodybuilder and Wolfpack drug smuggler, made a plea bargain with the Crown in 2015, where in exchange for a guilty plea, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Despite the way that Sinaloa Cartel had pushed the Wolfpack aside, the group still retained a vestigial existence on the margins of Canadian organised crime. An independent soldier and Wolfpack member, Sukhveer Singh Dio, moved from Surrey to Toronto. In March 2014, Dio was arrested on charges of smuggling cocaine, but was released after he posted bail. After his release, Dio went into hiding. On May 23, 2016, Dio made the international news when he attended a Toronto Raptors basketball game at the Rogers Centre and abused the referees for supposedly favouring the visiting Cleveland Cavaliers team so violently that he was expelled from the building. Dio's abuse of the referees led to several YouTube videos being made about him as an example of an obnoxious Toronto Raptors fan. On June 7, 2016, Dio was murdered in Toronto by 2 killers disguised as construction workers. Dio had parked his automobile in the alley known locally as Cowbell Lane at the corner of Yonge Street and Eglinton Avenue and seemed to be waiting for someone. 2 hitmen dressed as construction workers walked down Cowbell Lane and shot Dio 14 times. Dio's murder made the headlines of the newspapers in his native India, with the Times of India running a front-page story entitled, "A Gangster and an NBA Fan." Edwards and Nehera used Dio's murder as typical of the Wolfpack, who had an obsession with attracting attention to themselves. The Wolfpack came to be involved in a gang war in Toronto in 2016, 20 and 18 with the Siderno Group. One of the mid-ranking Wolfpack leaders, Tassos Leventis, moved from Montreal to Toronto, where in June 2016 he very publicly challenged and insulted the Comiso brothers who lead the Comiso and Drina in a Toronto restaurant. The incident ended with an angry Leventis picking up and throwing a chair at the Comiso brothers. On the 16th of August 2016, John Ignani of the Comiso Andrea was murdered in Toronto. Ignani was a friend of the Comisos, was a member of the Vagabonds Outbiker gang, and had been a member of the Wolfpack until the summer of 2016, when he fell out after not paying a drug debt. Like other Wolfpack leaders, Leventis often used WhatsApp and Telegram to communicate, which a tendency towards a democratization of Canadian organised crime, as younger, more technologically savvy criminals used messaging services to communicate with their leaders. Leventis was active in Mexico, where he had been imprisoned for 6 months in 2009 on charges of narcotics trafficking. On January 30, 2017, Leventis was shot on George Street in Toronto and was able to make his way into his condo, where he bled to death. On June 29, 2018, Cosimo Coco Comiso, not to be confused with his cousin Cosimo the Quail Comiso, was murdered in Woodbridge along with his mistress Chantel Almeida, who happened to have the misfortune in being in his car when the killer struck. Peter Edwards, the crime correspondent of the Toronto Star, stated in 2017, "On one side are the aggressive young computer-friendly newcomers from BC and Quebec, allied to a gang called the Wolfpack Alliance. On the other side are the old guard, the GTA Greater Toronto Area arm of the traditional Ndrangheta family of Cosimo the Quail Comiso of Siderno, Italy." Lindsay Horton of CFSU BC stated, "We've seen and heard the name Wolfpack over the last year. We've heard their name come up in places like Kamloops and Surrey, so they are still very active, and groups like the Red Scorpions and Independent Soldiers, these groups are still active and prominent in that world." On the 11th of May 2017, Wuchar, Caputo, Al-Khalil and Nero were all found guilty of first-degree murder in Toronto in connection with Raposo's murder in 2012. The accused were all sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for the next 25 years. As the guilty verdicts were announced, Wuchar, smirked in the courtroom as he seemed to take a perverse pride in being found guilty of first-degree murder. Nero looked stunned. Al-Khalil showed no emotion, and Caputo kept shaking his head and looking at his family. Nero was attacked in prison by another prisoner who tried to kill him with a homemade knife. The attempt failed, but the one of Nero's eyeballs was ripped out from the socket, leaving him blind in one eye. It is believed that the murder attempt was to punish him for leaving his email address and passport to the Pretty Good Privacy Network out in plain view in Fletcher's condo. On February 28, 2018, Ryak was convicted in the Philippines of drug trafficking and was sentenced to life imprisonment. The Sinaloa cartel is believed to have placed a contract on the lives of Caputo and the other Wolfpack leaders for losing $5 million worth of cocaine in 2012, an incident that has not been forgiven nor forgotten. As Caputo is serving a life sentence for his role in Raposo's murder, on the 18th of August 2019, his younger brother, Paolo Caputo, who had no known mafia associations beyond his relationship with his brother, was murdered. The police believed that the Sinaloa cartel had Paolo Caputo killed as a surrogate for killing his brother. Since 29th of June 2021, Amero and Al-Khalil were on trial in Vancouver for the 2012 murders of the rival gangsters Sandip Dure and Suvir Dak, with the Crown presenting the thesis that Al-Khalil and Amero hired Wilchar to kill Dure. On 21st July 2022, Al-Khalil escaped from the North Fraser Pretrial Centre jail and is now a free man. On August 29, 2022, Amero was convicted of 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder in connection with the slayings of Duri and Dak. As of 2023, the organization is still recognized by law enforcement as being actively involved in organized crime. Staff Sergeant to Lindsay Horton of the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit of British Columbia acknowledged in June 2023 that Wolfpack has had significant controlling influence over the downtown East Side drug trade for several years, and that street-level drug traffickers operating in the neighborhood are aligned with the Wolfpack alliance.